Chapter 5. Relax, but do not get comfortable. Lang noticed a shift in Eric. From there, what began as a simple observe operation turned into a pattern. Eric became an instrument with Lang, leading him throughout the world. He became a solution pulled from the shelf when problems became too politically radioactive for diplomacy and too messy to send in soldiers. The missions grew darker, each one wrapped in more and more deliberate vagueness. There would be no photographs, no biographies, no context of what he was to do, just simple coordinates, a time window and a green light. Targets became reduced to dots on a map. Eric learned quickly, the more he knew about a target, the more things would be complicated and simpler was better. Each mission after the farm stripped something away from him. The man who had once fished in creeks at night, run in the woods, memorized reactor diagrams and emergency protocols with almost reverent care, was dissolving into something narrower, sharper. Eric Rockwell had once been a sailor, a man who believed that there was something that existed to protect people. Now he was a weapon embedded inside that something and was used to remove whatever threatened the United States of America. The worst part was that he was good at it. Too good. Soon, he realized he no longer knew the man he once was. He would catch his reflection in dark windows or hotel mirrors and feel nothing of what he had become. He felt no pride, no guilt, no fear, just readiness. As if he were truly on this earth for one reason, and that reason was to prevent irreversible events from occurring. Lang sensed a break would do Eric good due to a recent mission failure that almost ended in his death, and got him stationed at the Naval Nuclear Power Training Command as a sea returnee instructor. He believed this would be a good break for Eric. However, to Eric, it felt like something else completely, that there was a different reason for taking him out of the field and placing him back in the spot where it all began. Then things changed for Eric. Lang was nowhere to be found. That was how the message came through the secured channels, clipped, bureaucratic, and unsettling in its simplicity. There was no explanation, no departure memo, no conversation between him and Lang about what he was going to be doing while he was on this break. There was no hint of what had prompted this disappearance, just a new case officer's name attached to Eric's Charleston rotation and a single line beneath it. Lang on temporary reassignment. With the message, Eric thought back to a time when Lang waited in his classroom one night at the farm. Lang had lingered a moment after the others had filtered out, studying the empty chairs like they were pieces left behind on a board. "You handled it well," he said, voice even. "No hesitation." Eric nodded, waiting for the rest. Lang continued, almost idly, "People fixate on outcomes like they're moral statements. They're not. They're math, and math doesn't care who cries afterward." Something about the way he said afterward gave Eric pause, but he dismissed it as fatigue, as the difference between theory and field reality. Lang had survived longer than anyone Eric knew. That had to count for something. Eric had learned long ago that in the CIA, the words temporary reassignment were words that had no fixed meaning. Sometimes it could be a cooling-off period, such as what he was supposed to be on. Sometimes it was meant as a quiet purge. Sometimes it was meant that someone had stepped into a shadow they were not meant to come back from. The word hung there on the screen like a warning, like a fault line waiting to erupt and cause chaos. He stared at the message longer than he really should have. The cursor blinked beneath his new case officer's name, steady and indifferent, as if it were a machine waiting for the next input to be received. Lang had been more than a handler. Lang was Eric's ballast. It was the weight that kept him from drifting when the operational currents pulled too hard in the wrong direction. Without him, the world felt subtly unbalanced. It was as if a nuclear reactor were running without its senior operators there in the control room to monitor it. Everything still looked stable, and that look is what made it dangerous. Charleston was supposed to be a break, a soft assignment, low visibility, sun, water, and relaxation instead of what had become normal to Eric's life. There were no more random locations, unknown assignments. To Eric, though, it felt like exile. The city had swallowed him whole and spat him out onto unfamiliar streets where he had no maps, no intel, no Lang. Eric walked the battery at dusk, air clinging to his clothes as container ship after container ship slid silently through the harbor. Their lights cut thin paths across the dark water, reflections stretching and shattering as if they were veins. Each vessel, Eric thought, was carrying thousands of tons of cargo, whether that be machines, chemicals, food, weapons, or secrets, but somehow from the shore they all looked identical. Anonymous hulls with varying country flags at their tail end, moving in practiced silence, carrying a piece of something that belonged to the world he used to think that he understood. Something about these ships' movements reminded him too much of the world he knew. Layers upon layers of movement, protocol, and intent, all appearing neutral on the surface. But he had learned to read beneath the surface. Every man, every ship, every fleeting look could be some sign. His new handler, a junior officer only named Hayes, was someone he had never heard of before, but somehow had the audacity to call this break routine operations. As if this was something that Eric had never been told before, routine operations that spiraled out of control, that caused bodies to be left in undisclosed locations throughout the world. Hayes mentioned that there were to be no disruptions, just minor observation missions. It would be relaxing at dockside bars, teaching young students what he once learned, plain, boring office walls, and a historic downtown area that he could explore to get his mind off of what once was. Then came an assignment. So much for relaxing, Eric thought. This assignment was for Eric to observe suspected downtown freight workers who might be a part of something bigger. Just one additional detail was given this time which was never given before. Eric sprang to action, getting back into his old ways. Although this time he was told that there would be no green light, no bodies were to be left. For 3 days he let the city swallow him. Coffee shops in the morning, shady motel lobbies in the afternoon, dockside bars after dark. He memorized faces the way he once memorized schematics. What their posture meant, where their eyes were looking, and how long someone hesitated before opening a door. Who arrived at what time and who they left with. Who seemed to be trained to check for a tail or look at reflections in mirrors. Every micro-expression, every hesitation, every twitch could be meaningful, he thought. Most of the men were forgettable, random laborers, drifters, a few veterans with old injuries and newer formed grudges from feelings of being mistreated. But every so often, some of them would exchange a look that lingered just a fraction too long. Folded papers being passed beneath the table. A name would be spoken and immediately drowned in laughter. Once in a bar near the courthouse, he heard it clearly. That group is planning some sort of revenge. I just know it. The rest vanished beneath the scrape of chairs and the clatter of glasses as patrons toasted to something. Eric did what he was told. Through all the missions, he never sent a report of what he saw or heard. He would only use the knowledge he gained to take out those whom someone above his pay grade deemed necessary. Therefore, Eric had notes, maybe too many notes, he thought. Being unaware of this type of mission, he did not know what was too much or what was too little. Eric typed his encrypted email to Hayes and pressed send of what he had observed. Hayes replied a couple of hours later. You are reading too much into this. Half of the city is full of angry immigrants and ex-soldiers. There are too many of them to track every single one. Just relax a little. Remember, these are minor missions assignments. Eric did not argue. He knew that if he tried, it would fall on deaf ears. He did not have the same relationship with this new handler as he did with Lang. He also knew that when he asked questions, it often carried more risk than it did answers, and that made things complicated. That night, standing on the waterfront watching the ships move in and out of the harbor, he felt a sense of unease that he had felt before. The feeling that something bad will happen. as if pressure was pegging high and an explosion was near. Back in his apartment, he spread his notes across the table, names without context, meetings that did not align with work schedules, locations chosen for meetings not for their convenience but for symbolism, the back alleys, the port, places not meant to be noticed if something was to occur. He had seen it before. These people, whoever they are not hiding, they are positioning. Eric's finger hovered over the send button to shoot another report asking what his next steps are to be. Deciding to send it, he depressed the button and then shut down his laptop. The refrigerator hummed softly, the only sound in the room. He stared at the blank wall and thought about Lang. He thought about the way he could talk to Lang about what he was seeing and could bounce ideas off of him. Sleep came in fragments that night. He woke before dawn, his heart racing. He jumped up and checked his computer. Nothing from Hayes, nothing from anyone.